A year ago, I put out a video outlining the real problems with the retro costumes in Mortal 1 Kombat. The response was generally quite positive, since I was one of the few people not being needlessly hostile with my takes on the subject. Go watch or rewatch that before we continue, because I'll be picking up from there. Last time I discussed NetherRealm's clear bias towards reproducing the arcade and NetherRealm era costumes as faithfully as possible, while making unnecessary alterations to those from the 3D era. Back then, the costumes we had were the cameo fighters up to Tremor and Story Chameleon, the 3D era costumes for Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Nitara and Li Mei, and the MK11 costumes for Shang Tsung and Raid Shadowlet. No, I'm just kidding. There's no sponsor this time. Would have been funny though. But before we pick up where we left off last time, I want to quickly discuss the anomalies that were added since then. Returning for the first time since MK3, some are the same, like Shang Tsung's very based snake form, while others have been replaced or swapped around, like Johnny inheriting Cyrax's shark and turning it into a fairly obvious reference to Surfshark VPN, the sponsor of today's video. Yes! Nitpick Jesus is still king of the segue. Hi, I'm Sub-Zero MK3 from Fortnite Battle Royale.
No! That is not Sub-Zero MK3.
In this day and age, the threat of an attack on our cybersecurity is very high, and the people who should be looking out for us don't care. Striker! But luckily, next time some 12-year-old threatens to hack your IP address, someone has your back. Hey Surfshark? Shoot that guy. Surfshark will hide your real IP address with a Shang Tsung morph to protect you from invasions from other timelines of ill repute, or even from them finding yours. And yes, this also applies to using the public Wi-Fi at, for example, your local McDonald's while trying to get these damn Sonic 3 balls that have multiple boxes for the same ball, forcing you to go back over and over again and consistently threatening your digital security. And of course you can bypass region locks on games, movies, TV shows, etc. So when MK2 drops later this year and goes straight to Max in like a month, we in the UK can still watch it here before WB finally launches the damn service here 6 years late! Or I guess you could watch good content, I won't judge. But is this all just for one device? No, of course not. You can protect all your devices on one account. PC, phone, laptop, tablet, console, all of it can be protected from being merged into the one being, I don't know, I can only come up with so many forced MK references for one ad segment. But Surfshark Alert is also included to help detect data leaks of your personal details as well. So, all that sound good? Safe browsing, access to global content, and maybe even saving a lot of money with a 30-day free trial with a money-back guarantee. Check the link in the description or go to surfshark.com/thesnake for 4 extra months free. I mean, this thing was basically made to be promoted by me. Thank you Surfshark for sponsoring the video, and now, let's talk retro costumes. Oh, what the hell, one more for the road. Hey Surfshark?
Shoot that guy!
I think things are generally in a better place than last year, so this one will be a more general discussion of the costumes rather than the comparison between the different eras' representations I did back then. First, NetherRealm has improved in one area. DLC costumes are now half the price they used to be. The first 4 retro costumes are still 1000 Dragon Crystals, but everything released after is down to 500. Obviously this will ruffle some feathers, but the alternative is upsetting those who already bought them at full price and either refunding half of that cost to them, or having an arguably worse stain on their reputation by doing nothing. So I get it. However, some other costumes released around that time I'm pretty sure are also down to 500 now, so I don't know, man. The FOMO availability issue is still not fixed, and NetherRealm and WB can still go to hell for that. Any company that uses this limited availability crap factually does not care about their customers, because this is pure psychological manipulation, which is not something you do if you're a good person. But as for the retro costumes released since those original 4, we've had quite a few from a variety of sources. We can start with the cameos. Chameleon was not yet available as a cameo last time, but is now. Her design is unchanged from the story version, save for the use of colours to reflect her current power set, which rarely lets you see her actual base colour palette, which is why they really should have gone with a more literal interpretation of the phrase alternate skins. Her palettes are decent, with the green used to represent her in Armageddon renders, and her default being grey as a nod to her debut in Trilogy N64. Bafflingly, the yellow version, despite being a simple texture that is already in the game files for story fights she features in, is not available yet. They just made 6 other ones instead. It's like Quan Chi's brown skin, but that was added as gear to the game's files in the Ghostface update, but is still currently unavailable. What is with NetherRealm and these baffling decisions? Fortunately, the potential of this costume, along with the initial batch and 2 of the cameos, was showcased by JC over on Twitter, highlighting ways the costumes could be more faithful and more tasteful with their alterations. I especially love the Nitara concept. Movado and Farah saw release later, pulling from Deadly Alliance and MKX respectively. Movado's costume is mostly changed in small ways that make it less appealing to me. More of his chest is covered by straps under his coat, the coat has gone from black to just a dark grey. The shoulder pad now blends in with the leather, the other shoulder is slightly covered now for some reason, and I know the in-game model isn't like this, but the blue pants in his render look way better than having so much of his fit be a single colour. The new arm tattoo and the pattern applied to the inside of the coat are good though, I like those. This is not a major deviation from the original, but it's not as appealing to me. The most substantial change is his face and hair now making him look much younger and much more like a certain classic YouTuber. His fatality is based on the one from Deadly Alliance but given a gorier, less goofy presentation than the original. I like it, but I would have loved to see the original presented as is in 2024. Farah is based on her default costume and Vicious variation, hence the feathered headdress. All that's really changed are a slightly bulkier build, the addition of fur over her shoulders, some extra material over her stomach and thighs, and more vibrant colours to reflect this game's aesthetic over MKX's drab palette. Unlike her fellow MKX alum Tremor, her fatality actually is pulled directly from her debut, just without Toad to hold the opponent's arms, which it would have been fun to see her fighter partner do instead. I still like it for being so short. Now, the second batch of fighter costumes was received rather differently from the first. Deadly Alliance Shang Tsung and Quan Chi, and Deception Sindel and Shao Kahn. This batch was shocking after the mess that was the first one. Quan Chi's has only a few changes from the original. Of course, given how many games it's been in, people would notice immediately if they deviated in any notable manner. The biggest change is the small red circle on his chest harness now being a big dumb red button that probably makes his arms fall off. Aside from that and the fingerless gloves, deviations are negligible. Of course, once again, given how many games it's been in, a case can be made that some deviation every now and then is actually a good thing. And his gear continues to be the best gear in the game, offering his classic tattoos but also leaving room to use others like the defaults if you'd prefer something closer to MK9. Imagine actually being able to make something with a customization system. That video is going to be real fun to make. Shang Tsung is another one that had a ton of small alterations that don't detract from the appeal of the original. I was shocked they bothered changing his hair and giving him his goatee. The most substantial changes are the gloves now being fingerless, but even the MK11 costume has that kind of deviation here, and the stole is tied in his belt. This is forgivable since it would very likely go crazy under modern physics engines, and the much higher level of dismemberment is easier to account for if half of the article is effectively just a texture on his chest. Either way, it's a really solid adaptation. Really, I just wish they'd do something interesting with his morph. Maybe make it more like Shaolin monks, at least in colour scheme. Sindel's is a strange one. Unlike any before, this one is not strictly either of her costumes from Deception. It's both. The colours and much of the torso fit derive from the default, while the crossing straps, other leather, and presence of a crown are pulled from the alternate. I didn't expect them to go as far as to include the white eyes and facial markings, but they did. It's not a particularly good rendition of the two costumes, but it does enough to evoke that era, and it's sadly her best costume in the game. On that same note, Shao Kahn. This one is supposed to be his default from Deception, and there are a few flavours of that here, but that's mostly stuff that's carried over into the sequels anyway. The most Deception-y part is the belt and loincloth, and even they got changed quite a lot. This is pretty much just a brand new design masquerading as a retro costume, even more so than Sindel's. And the sad part is, once again, this is his best design in the game. Hell, I'd argue it's his best since Deception. Even his big dumb horns don't look as bad when he has a helmet you can pretend they're simply an adornment of. My only critique is that his chest and thighs are covered too much by fabric. Shao should be showing off as much as Conan. I think these two in particular really highlight the benefit of bringing back costumes from a different era because they're so different from everything else this game offers, and often for the better. Variety in the costumes is a wonderful thing, and it's a shame that the base costumes could not capitalise on that. The UMK3 male ninja suits were added next, with all of them having one by now. Unusually though, they tweaked the design to have the little ears John Tobias would draw them with, and which only appeared in the games themselves in MK4. Looks more like these ancient action figures than the game version. It looks a little odd and some fans may dislike it, but it does have some basis in historic depictions of these suits, and it helps distinguish it from the MK2 suits used for cameos, so I can give it a pass. Overall, they look solid, and I think they're far better than MKX's versions from a colour and texturing standpoint, and there was always something about the faces and masks that looked off to me in MKX. Overall, I think these are a win, aside from there being 7 of them that are purchased separately, and NetherRealm's trademark horrendous concepts for alternate palettes. Alongside the first few, Sub-Zero was given his vanilla MK3 design. I know it's something they haven't done since MK9 despite the number of opportunities to do so, but it's a shame they didn't give this costume Kuai Liang's face and voice. It's kinda weird seeing Bihan's face with a Kuai Liang outfit and scar. As is to be expected for an arcade era costume, this one is faithful to a fault, save for the ice kunai randomly added to the belt like this was MK11. Like Deadly Alliance Scorpion, masks are not allowed with this costume for whatever reason. Sure, take it away from Masked Sub-Zero so that he looks weird and unfinished, but don't you dare add one to Unmasked Sub unless you're playing the Switch port. What, was that an apology for the state that version launched in? Around the same time, the 1995 Movie Ninja costumes joined the game, initially only for Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Reptile and Smoke, but later coming for Rain and Ermac too. No word on Noob, but it's guaranteed to come eventually. As is to be expected after MK11's offerings, these ones are lovingly recreated, arguably more so. Again, they're let down by the horrible alternate palettes. As for the masks, those actually in MK95 were given their proper masks, while Smoke's was made up, since his only appearances in this setting were as a cyborg and in a smoke form. The mask they made up fits in very well with the others, to the point I'd believe you if you said they got one of the 95 costume designers to consult. Rain and Ermac, however, used their Annihilation masks. It's fine for Ermac, but Rain wore one of these suits in Conquest where he had a different purple mask. And given he's the only one here who can't wear a mask in his own colour scheme, this is very unfortunate. Biggest downside here outside of the, again, horrendous colour palettes. Soon after Chaos Reigns dropped, fan theories about Empress Melina's veil being a test for the viability of Deception Melina were validated when that costume came back. Shockingly, despite the original rocking up in a thong, this one is pretty damn faithful. I expected them to add pants like the MKX concept art, but all they did was fill out her undergarment a bit to be a tad more tasteful. The boots are longer and softer, more akin to the MK2 ones for some reason. There are some arbitrary alterations scattered about as well, like her belt now being less pronounced and being much longer with pink added, her top's pattern being changed, the addition of a headdress, her torso belt being moved up, and the back flap being thinner, opaque, and losing its colour. While it's possible I've just not seen them due to Melina stands being Melina stands, I've not seen any real complaints about this costume. Even with the arbitrary changes that don't seem to relate to agendas or mechanical practicality, no one seems to mind. I suppose it's because the new design still retains the core essence of the original, retains its appeal, and for this game representing that era, that is a miracle. Alongside her, MK9 Smoke was added. This may seem like an odd choice given the otherwise total lack of MK9 costumes, but options for him were limited. Deception and Armageddon gave him 2 forms, a cyborg and a smoke creature. The smoke creature wouldn't work because of finishers, as him, for example, losing skin wouldn't make sense. Plus, we've seen that NetherRealm won't let a character revert to human for those moves, so this costume isn't possible. Second, the game has no cyber innards designed, which the cyborg costume would require, since Sector and Cyrax are now A, women, and B, in power suits instead of being cyborgs. Depending on what the T1000 is given for finishers, how original and distinct from the traditional T800 endoskeleton it is, we might be able to get Cyber Smoke then. Otherwise we'll have to make do with Twitch drop cameo Cyrax and hope for a 3D era Smoke cameo in future, since finishers can't be done on them, so the devs don't need to worry about that. Oh, also, he did have a human form in the 3D era, but that was in a secret area in Shaolin Monks, and I can't see nearly as many people clamouring for its return compared to the one from MK9. But how is the costume itself? I like it. His best look in the game by my estimate, and I never even liked the original. The hair always looks off to me, but this version has his hair down, which may go against the appeal to some. Additionally, the costume itself seems to draw on the second costume from 9 as well, but that could just be the default armor looking fake back then compared to what they can pull off now. As with Melina, despite the changes, I've seen no notable backlash to this, so the essence of the design seems to have made it through unscathed. But it's a NetherRealm era costume, so what did we really expect? And most recently, as mentioned, the MK2 Lady Ninja costumes were added. Again. Initially, I was unhappy with this one and voiced my irritation on Twitter, more on that later. But once the costumes actually released, yeah, I kinda liked them. Funny thing is, they actually did change these ones quite a bit, which is highly unusual for NetherRealm when it comes to arcade era costumes. They've added all these lines and different shaded areas that are the bane of every superhero fan's existence in modern times. But I have to assume NetherRealm felt that putting out the same costumes for the 4th time in a row required something a little different to justify it, or that they finally realised those suits are mid as fuck and wanted to try something different with them. Alongside Kitana and Mileena, Tanya also received this, effectively canonizing her as the yellow female ninja. I know Armageddon did first, but shut up. But they didn't make it pure MK2, keeping her unmasked and giving her a ponytail. This is all a nod to her MK4 costume. I'd much rather actually have that one, but I'll take a nod to it, I guess. Better than botching the original, right? And even though it would be very easy for NetherRealm to give her green palettes as a nod to Jade, they didn't. So her inclusion is still on the table. Jade stans can officially stop being dicks about it now. And then, while I was working on this video, the MK11 Sector and Cyrax costumes we never got to use were added for the cameo versions as expected. I can't see any notable changes, they might even be the same models for all I know. I'm happy to see them finally usable by the player, but it would have been far better if playable Sector and Cyrax had stayed men and been given these so we could use them more fully. And before we delve into the MK2 Lady Ninja controversy, let's make a few predictions for other retro costumes that could be on the horizon if the game doesn't die with T1000. First, filling out the lists, Movie Noob Cybot is guaranteed, since it's the least work needed so far thanks to him sharing his face with Sub-Zero. That exact model can be recolored as is. We're certainly not getting the canonical Threshold Noob Cybot. Second, should Jade make the cut, she'll get MK2 as well. Scarlet will not make the cut since Nitara already does most of her stuff, but Chameleon might get a grey version of this. Deception Havoc is basically confirmed. His headgear is seen on a Havoc in the Chaosium in the Chaos Reigns reveal trailer. It was removed from the final cutscene, but if the asset exists and wasn't thrown in to celebrate Havoc's big break, then it's definitely being saved to drop with a full costume. Sector and Cyrax will probably get the MK9 Cyber Scarlet design from the Vita port, since actually designing female versions of 3D era Sector and Cyrax is clearly more work than NetherRealm are willing to put in. At most, they'll give both their appropriate helmets. And Reptile will be lucky to get a decent looking Shaolin Monk's costume, most likely getting the clothes right save for something weird and wrong, then slapping that hideous lizard texture onto his human face. Even though we all know the right way to do this is adapt his second palette and have Deadly Alliance Reptile as his morph. And here's more predictions I won't bore you with the details of. Now about that Twitter stuff. I put out a tweet expressing my exasperation with NetherRealm adding Kitana's, and by extension Mileena's, MK2 costume into M1K just as they had in MK9, X and 11. Predictably, a lot of people took umbrage with this, and threw out the usual bad arguments in favour of this. So let's go through them and systematically break down why they are not good arguments. First off, if you like this costume and want it back, that's fine. You do you, but it doesn't invalidate my arguments against it. A lot of people think that their opinion being the opposite of someone else's invalidates the other person's by default. That's fucking stupid. Now for the bad arguments they actively presented me with. To be clear, I don't hold animosity towards some of these people. Some simply presented responses that I don't think hold water. The rest are dicks though. One is that it's iconic and thus should be included always. I've criticised this mindset in the past in relation to the roster and it applies here too. It's stagnant and boring. Other characters are getting 3D era costumes that haven't been seen since 2006, while this has been in every entry since 2011. It would have been far cooler to have one of Kitana's 3D era costumes instead. I'm sure we'll get one eventually, given Mileena has both, but if we had to have 2D era costumes, why not someone who's never had one before like Shang Tsung, or someone whose costume would stand out against their existing offerings like Liu Kang? Of course, we've long established the reason why they keep doing this. They only need to make one model with a few different palettes and swappable heads, and they can sell it as 3, maybe even 4 different costumes despite not putting in as much work as such a price deserves. The male ninjas count 7 this time. One person asserted this as Kitana's iconic look, which it isn't. Her UMK3 one is, since that's the one that most heavily influenced later designs, with even the MK2 retellings in Shaolin Monks and MK9 basing her look more on 3. The most common complaint was that I then need to make the same argument against the UMK3 male ninja costumes that were added a few months earlier. The framing of this one is to imply sexism. Listen, if you see criticism aimed in the direction of a woman and immediately cry sexism, you are the sexist one. You would not make this argument if someone aimed the same criticism at a man. This is preferential treatment to avoid having to face criticism of someone or something based on sex. That is textbook sexism. As for why it's a bad argument even divorced from the inherent bigotry, these two things simply are not comparable. The MK2 Lady Ninja costumes were included in MK9 as part of compatibility packs for the DLC fighters, then in MKX via MK Mobile, both for free. Then they had them in MK11 as a paid DLC during Kombat Pack 1, and now it's in M1K as paid DLC. 4 games in a row, twice as paid DLC. The UMK3 male ninja costumes were included in MK9 exclusively in the Vita port, so that really doesn't count since barely anyone played that. then in MKX as free DLC, then they were teased in MK11's reveal trailer but never actually added to the game, and then M1K got them towards the end of year 1. 4 games in a row versus twice across 4 games. No, you're right, that's definitely the same thing. I do have to criticise the male ninjas too. And while it's not the UMK3 ones, I have criticised the constant reuse of the MK2 male ninja costumes in previous videos. Those were featured for some characters in MK9, then skipped MKX, made it to all the male ninjas in MK11, and were used for cameos here, including for Tremor, who never had that design before. I've criticised NetherRealm's laziness and repetition so many times, so don't fucking come for me saying I don't bring this against the male ninjas. Yes, I fucking do. Shut your mouth. Another argument is that other fighting games have retro costumes too, so this is fine. First off, even children understand the idea that just because other people do it doesn't mean it's fine. But to play devil's advocate, yes, Street Fighter does constantly bring back SF2 and Alpha costumes for its cast. However, Street Fighter characters, historically, don't change design substantially all that much. What other core costumes can Ryu have in SF6 now that his SF2 costume is in the game? Alpha, 3, 4 and 5 all use the same costume with only slight variation. He doesn't have a wide wardrobe to choose from. But Katana has MK2, UMK3/Gold, Deadly Alliance, Armageddon, Shaolin Monks, MK vs DC Universe, MK9, and MKX. I don't count MK11 as retro. And this is just the game's primary costumes, not counting others from 9RX, her Blue Melina recolor from Deception, not even from adaptations. Tekken is bringing back prior costumes from the most recent entry and a handful from older ones, but even those characters have had fairly static core designs since 5, and the DLC isn't going back past Tekken 4, so I don't think this argument holds up either in context or out. Then we have the idea that you asked for classic costumes then complained about getting them, which is pure fallacy. Fandoms are not a monolith. They don't all share an opinion, so 2 different views you see from within the fandom don't inherently reflect the same people. Does another fan criticising the presence of something you wanted mean you are now criticising it? No! I never asked for arcade era costumes, only 3D. Those are the classic costumes I asked for, and NetherRealm has been delivering with their characteristic fluctuating levels of success. But just because someone else asked for MK2 Katana to come back again doesn't mean I did, so to try and paint me and others like me as unreasonable, unpleasable trolls is disingenuous. And then we get the usual assertions that people should stop complaining or that fans are unpleasable. It's just the standard shallow glazing from fanboys. It's fine to complain a lot about a consistent issue. You can't tell someone they're not allowed to complain about something that displeases them, otherwise that same argument can be cast back onto you. So, as you can see, very few of the dissenting responses actually had a worthwhile argument. Most are draped in fallacy and bad faith, and that's not healthy for any discussion. Now, let's close off by discussing another topic I brought up last time, but mostly in passing. In the modern MK games, retro costumes are given usually 4 to 6 different colour palettes for the customization. And I mentioned last time how they seem to go out of their way to avoid using the existing alternate palettes for the 3D era costumes, which is then more work because they have to make all the palettes from scratch, and they're usually dog shit. So, let us highlight just how many retro costumes in this game actually have their original alternate palettes as one of the 3 to 5 they had to make for this game. MK1. Johnny Cage. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. Kano. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. Sonya. Yes. MK2. Jax. No. Katana. Yes. Kung Lao. Yes. Melina. Yes. Scorpion. Yes. And there's one from 11 too. Sub-Zero. Not quite, but 2 of them are closer to it than to the default. MK3. Cyrax. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. Ermac. Technically, it's the default that's missing. Jax. No. The MK2 one kinda has it though, and this has the MK2 base colour. Kung Lao. Yes. And they brought back all but one of his MK11 palettes. Motaro. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. Noob Saibot. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. Rain. It's closer to the second than the first, which isn't present. Reptile. No, and the default is somewhere between the 2 palettes. Scorpion. Yes. Sector. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. Smoke. It's closer to the second than the first, which isn't present. Sonya. Yes. Striker. Yes. Sub-Zero. Yes. Classic Sub-Zero. They're swapped around, but both are present. Deadly Alliance. Frost. No. Mavado. No, neither the Deadly Alliance nor Armageddon versions. Nitara. Not even with a 6th alternate colour offered later. Quan Chi. No. Scorpion. No. Shang Tsung. Kinda, but not really. Sub-Zero. No. Deception. Darius. Close enough. Li Mei. Close enough. Melina. No. Shao Kahn. No, unless this one's supposed to be his second costumes on the palette. Shujinko. Yes, even closer than the primary colour got for some reason. Sindel. No, from either costume they mixed into this one. Armageddon. Chameleon. She doesn't really have one, so that's fine. MK9. Smoke. No, but it's just a darker version, so that's fine. MKX. Farah. I'm pretty sure she doesn't have one, only Tor, so fair enough. MK11. Cyrax and Sector. They were NPCs, so they didn't have any. Raiden. 5 of the 6 are from 11, but one is a saturated variant of one that's already here. Shang Tsung. Aside from his default,
Not one.
and unless I mentioned it, they didn't reuse any other palettes from other times these costumes have reappeared. Here are the statistics for it. Why is this the statistic? Well, I guess that gave you more time to look at them. So in case some of you were concerned that this video doesn't really feel like much of a sequel to the previous one, because that one had a very specific focus while this one is just kind of talking about costumes and reviewing them, here's your fucking sequel. NetherRealm is never going to change. If it's any small comfort, the only games not currently represented through retro costumes now are MK4 and DCU, respectively games 4 and 8. So, if the pattern holds, we can all look forward to Game 12 also being ignored in the future, because who the hell wants any of this crap coming back? If you liked this video, why not subscribe and support me on Patreon like these fine people here? If not, then you're probably a stan for the MK2 Lady Ninja costumes, and I need to let you know, they're mid as fuck. Today's recommended video is The Hate for 3D Era MK is Unreasonable by Rail Deal Games. I think the results of this video kind of prove that that statement is 100% true.